Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to share every single book that I've read in 2025 with you. So according to my Goodreads, I've read 151 books this year, which is a lot. I am just gonna kind of go over the books I've read, essentially the lasting impressions that I have from this book. I don't really write many reviews. That is actually a goal of mine in 2026, is to write more reviews and also read a little less. Just read with like more intention and take more time to read my books and not just try to fly through them and intake as many as possible, which is sort of what this year felt like. There's sort of that balance between wanting to read so many books and getting through your physical TBR, but then also wanting to sort of savor the books and enjoy them. So I felt like I was a little bit like off balance with that this year, and next year I'm going to try to rebalance that. I hope that made sense. I'm going to go through all the books that I read and just chat about the impression that it's left me with either months later or weeks later, however long ago I read this book. I feel like I didn't do like a great job of like reading wrap-ups this year, so maybe I'll do them in the order that I read them. Okay, my bookshelves are empty, which is also one of the reasons I'm filming on the floor right now. I have all of the books that I've read right here, which is just like such a massive pile. It's kind of insane. Okay, the very first book that I finished this year is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. I thought it was a very good romance. I don't think I would rate it in any of my top romances at this point, but I really enjoyed it and I thought it was a great start to the series. Then I read Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. I felt like we skipped over some really important parts, sort of other parts dragged on. Like the pacing for this wasn't the best. The next book I read is Twisted Love by Enna Huang. This I was really excited for, but it was not for me. I think I'm realizing I just don't really like the men in this series, is sort of what I found. I find them to be kind of rude and disrespectful, not necessarily in their words, but in their actions. Then I went back to the Red Rising series with Morning Star by Pierce Brown. I really liked this one. I found it very addictive. Then I read As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. I've liked this whole series, but this one really stood out to me. It was very vivid. I couldn't really put it down. I think I read it all in one sitting. It was really, really good. The Burning God, the third book in the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. It felt a little bit all over the place for me. I didn't love it as much as I loved the first two books, but I really want to reread the series physically and see my opinion on that then, because overall I really loved this series. Then we have Ruin and Rising, concluding another trilogy. I did not like the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I wish I stopped after the first one. It does not get better. I will continue the Grishaverse series, but I am very happy that Shadow and Bone is finally over. I found also the characters to be kind of insufferable, so. Okay, and then I read the very anticipated new release of Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I liked that we sort of ventured out of the geographical area that we normally have to stay in. For that reason, I really liked it. Then I read Children of Fallen Gods. I love this trilogy so much. I listened to them as audiobooks, which I kind of regret doing a little bit, and I do want to reread this series physically. This fantasy series was so unique in the premise, and for that reason, I really loved it. Okay, then I read House of Earth and Blood, the first book in the Crescent City trilogy, and I absolutely loved this. This was definitely one of my top reads of the year, and I honestly finished the series and immediately wanted to reread it. It was so good. Okay, the next book that I read was The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. I really liked these characters and they made it like just super enjoyable to read, even though at the end of the day it is just about two characters traveling from point A to point B. But yeah, definitely had me on the edge of my seat, my heart beating. It was very thrilling and the ending did not disappoint. Okay, the next book I read was Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This one was really, really good. This one was definitely one of my favorite romances I've ever read. I just completely believed their connection and I really liked them together. Honestly, all I can really ask for from a romance book. Okay, next up I have a nonfiction, and that is Unwinding Anxiety. To be honest, I don't really remember much of this book. Okay, next up is House of Sky and Breath, the second book in the Crescent City series. I don't really even know what I would rank the Crescent City series books in terms of my favorite. Probably the first one's my favorite, the second's my second favorite, and the third is my third favorite. They're honestly so close in ranking. Even saying that feels wrong. Like the second one might be my favorite, but then also the third one I actually really love. This next book is Sanctuary of the Shadow by Aurora Asher. It was actually very, very good. I had a great time reading it. The next book that I read is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. This is definitely one of my favorite romances. At this point, we really fell in love with Rose Hill and the cast of extended characters. This is definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. Okay, next I continued the Throne of Glass series of Sarah J Maas with Queen of Shadows, and I really liked it. The next book that I read is Flawless by Elsie Silver. I liked this book. I don't think it would be my favorite in the Chestnut Springs series. I didn't feel particularly close to either of them, but I did like them and I liked their story a lot. Okay, next up I read a novella, Six Scorched Roses. This is also in the Crowns of Nyxia series, and it kind of caught me off guard, but I really liked this. I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're reading the series and you're debating about reading the novella. I would 100% suggest it. It kind of stands on its own, to be honest. Okay, next up is the third book in the Rosehill series, which is Wildside by Elsie Silver. This was definitely my least favorite in the Rosehill series. Okay, next up we have another novella, which is Killjoy. This is the novella in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series. This one left me, to be honest, a little disappointed. I kind of wanted a bit more, but it really had nothing to do with anything of the main plot. It's just sort of our main cast playing a murder mystery dinner party. I don't think this is necessary. Okay, next up I finally finished The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This book is incredible. I'm so happy we finally got to know a story. I will say though that like the Hunger Games movies really do such an amazing adaptation. I can't say that I got much more out of the book than I did from seeing the movie, but it was still enjoyable and I'm glad that I finally finished it. Next up I read the first novella in the Loath to Love You bind up. It was okay for a novella, not my favorite in the series. Next up I read the third book in the Crescent City series, The House of Flame and Shadow. Alright, the next two books that I read was the tandem read of Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn. I really liked these. I know people really hate on Tower of Dawn. I did audiobook this one because I did hear those reviews and people saying that like it was really hard to pick this one up while you were reading this one, and I think if I were reading it physically I would probably agree. So I switched between an audiobook of this and the physical copy of this, and I thought that was the perfect mix, and I loved these two books. They were incredible. Alright, the next book I read is Heartless by Elsie Silver, continuing on the Chestnut Springs series. I think this one would be my second favorite book out of the series. Then I read Stuck With You, which is the second book in this novella collection, and I think my favorite out of the novella collection. I just really loved both of our main characters, and the amount of depth that was able to be included in this novella was really impressive, and yeah, I really liked it. The next book that I read is The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis. This is part of the Narnia series, and this one might have been my favorite out of the entire series. I really loved this. It was just such a sweet and wholesome story. It had quite the adventure in here. Okay, and then next I read Below Zero, and this one is really close second. Then the next book I read was Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I felt like the plot in this one was really good. It was very high stakes and it was very interesting and really fun to read about. And then The Voyage of the Dawn Treader was okay. I don't know, I think I just like some of the other books better. Then I read Sunrise on the Reaping. I really enjoyed this book. I'm so glad we finally got Haymitch's story. I think it was very impressive the way that Susan Collins wrote this in a way that it was still very interesting to follow along, even though you kind of know a lot of what happened to Haymitch if you've read the rest of the Hunger Games. So I don't think there was necessarily anything particularly new in here in terms of information, but somehow it was still so incredible to follow along and so devastating and heartbreaking. Like, you know it, but then reading about it is just so different and it hits so much harder. Then I finally read Funniest Story by Emily Henry. I really liked this book. It was one of my top reads of the year. I loved their connection. It was just so witty. Their banter in here was just so fun. I feel like this is, for me, Emily Henry's best work. Okay, then I read the last two books in the Narnia series, which are The Silver Chair and The Last Battle. Honestly, I don't really remember too much from The Last Battle. Silver Chair was good, but I just don't think it was the best story. Then I read Reckless by Elsie Silver, and this book I enjoyed a lot. I love the male main character in this book, and I love the female main character in this book, and I love their relationship. Their banter is definitely one of my favorite romance books of all time. And then I also read Hopeless. I definitely enjoyed it, but I think it would be probably my least favorite in the series. Then I read Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I really like this world. I really like the magic system in here. It's a long book, but honestly it doesn't feel that long when you're reading. Okay, so then I jumped back into the Red Rising series with Iron Gold. This sort of follows a different timeline. We sort of jump into the future with the Next Generation, and this was so good. I really enjoyed this sort of second trilogy in the series. Then I read The Twisted Throne. I love the series as a whole, but I feel like since I've read the first 4 books, there's been such a massive break until The Twisted Throne, so I didn't feel as connected to everything, but I still really enjoyed it. Then I picked up Dark Age by Pierce Brown. This, I think, might be my favorite book in the whole series. It was really good. A lot happens and it's just so exciting. It was hard to put this one down. Then I read Trial of the Sun Queen. I actually really liked this series a lot, and I definitely think the first 2 books were the best. Then I read Watch Me by Tahira Mafi. I loved this book. Definitely felt YA, but that's okay because it is a YA book, so I can't really complain about that. I just feel like our characters are really fun. I feel like our male character is just so fun. Like, I feel like there's just lots of like really witty banter in here. I liked their connection. I liked the enemies to lovers that we have set up. I just devoured this. It was so good, and as always I love Tahira Mafi's writing. Then I read Reckless by Lauren Roberts. This book was unnecessary. Then I read The Fall All Risk by Abby Jimenez. If you're looking for a romance novella, I still remember it so vividly, even though I read it so long ago and it was just a novella. But yeah, I really liked it. Then I read Lightbringer, the last book that is currently out for the Red Rising series. I love this book. This one might be my favorite, or Dark Age. Those are sort of the two that I go between. Then I have my one and only reread of my entire life, actually, and that is Fourth Wing. After reading Onyx Storm, I kind of wanted to go back because I was hearing all these conspiracy theories and they're like, oh, way back in Fourth Wing, like, there's this hint of that and this hint of that, and I kind of wanted to go through myself and see if I could find any sort of Easter eggs and things like that. So I did have a really good time at rereading this. Then I read The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. This is a book that I started forever ago. Finally finished it this year. I actually really enjoyed it. I feel like this one was fun because I like Dark Academia for the vibes and the setting, but they're always like these crazy murder mysteries that are really twisted, and I don't like necessarily love that. I just like the aesthetic, so I still find myself reading them. But this is like a Dark Academia that's not dark and twisted, especially not The Atlas Six. So for that, I really liked it. Then I read Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. This was also one of my favorite reads of the year. This caught me so off guard. This has been on my shelf for way too long, and I finally picked it up, and it was such a beautiful story. It is very simple in its plot. It's really just about a few characters going on with their daily lives, but it was very hard-hitting, some of the views that they had, and I would recommend this to so many people. It was really good. Then I read Rule of the Aurora King, which is the second book in the Artifacts of Urano series, and I think this one would be my favorite. This one, the plot really picks up. You understand more of the world and the universe and how our people ended up in the conflict that they're ended up in. Then I read Nora Goes Off Script. The premise of this is not my favorite, but then the more I read, the more I got very hooked, and I stayed up like way too late having to finish this and see how it ends. Then I read Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. I truly enjoyed this book a lot. I really loved the setting of the world that we were in. I thought that that was really good. Then I read Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I definitely had very high expectations for this series because everybody said that they liked it so much more than Caraval. Personally, after reading this series and reading Caraval, I do like Caraval better, which I think might be a hot take, but I didn't really love our male main character in this. I just needed more from him. I didn't really love the love story in this. I felt very one-sided like the whole time. Then I read Silver Elite, and this was just such a fun experience. This book had such a big moment when it was released and with the hype, and I read it during that time, and that part was really fun. Stayed up late a few nights reading it, not being able to put it down. It was definitely not the most original thing ever. I don't think it was the best thing written, but it was entertaining and I had a good time. Then I read A Curse Carved in Bone, which is the second book in the saga of The Unfated. This left me very disappointed. I actually really loved the first book, and I don't know, I just felt like this book took forever to actually get to a single point, and it was very long-winded. Then I read The Ballad of Never After, and I feel like I kind of gave my review for this entire trilogy talking about the first one. Then I read Twisted Games by Anna Huang. I know I said I didn't love Twisted Love by her, but I also didn't like the characters in that, and I thought maybe I would like the characters in this because I sort of read like what the setup would be. This one was definitely much better. Then I continued on with The Fate of the Sun King, and this is where I feel like this story just takes way too long to sort of get to the point. Then I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This book was good. It was exactly what I expected. It was a very interesting depiction of someone's life. I feel like if it interests you, pick it up. If it doesn't, then I wouldn't say go out of your way for it. Then I read Mile High, the first book in the Windy City series, and this one's definitely not my favorite in the series, but I'm glad that I was forewarned about the male main character and how brash he can kind of be, and having been forewarned probably helped with that. And then I read Tale of the Heart Queen, the final book in this series. Glad that like I read it and finally finished it, but again, I feel like this just didn't need to be this long. This could have been a trilogy of books half the size, and it would have been much better. Then I read The Right Move, which is the second book in the Windy City series, and I loved this book. I love the characters in this book so much. I honestly feel like I would have a really hard time ranking this series, so I don't think I'm going to, but I loved the second book a lot. Then I read This Dark Descent by Kaylin Josephson. I liked this story, the plot, the world. The characters were a little forgettable for me, but I remember enjoying this. Then I decided to continue the Twisted series with Twisted Hate. I thought I would like this because we get to know both of these characters before we get their story, but I really don't like it. And the third act conflict and what happens for the third act conflict, very diabolical, and I kind of hate this book. Then we have The Layover by Lacey Walden. I remember our main character and I remember the setup, but honestly the rest of the plot is very forgettable. incredible. Then I read Sacred Hospitality, which is a like novella in the Atlas 6 universe. I personally just didn't think it was necessary. Then I read The Atlas Paradox. Then I read Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, and I loved this book. This was the first Carly Fortune book I've ever read, and this was definitely a highlight read of the year for me. I absolutely love these characters, the setting, and the book. Then I read The Atlas Complex, which is the last book in the Atlas 6 series. This one was probably my second favorite, but I think still the Atlas 6 was my favorite, and this wasn't my favorite series, so honestly I would have just stopped at the Atlas 6. Then I read The Roughest Draft. I really like the premise of this, but honestly the execution just kind of let me down a little bit. Like, it was still good and enjoyable, but looking back, I just think it could have been so much better. Then I read City of Bones, which is the first book in the Mortal Instruments series. I've heard so much about the series, so I kind of wanted to see what it was all about, and in this book I really like the world. I feel like in this book the characters are also not really my favorite. It was just like an okay read for me. Then I read The Villa. I actually was really pleasantly surprised by this book. It's a bit of like a whodunit mystery, but it takes place kind of in the past but then crosses over to the present. Lots of like drama. I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did. Then I read Mother of Death and Dawn, which is the last book in the War of Lost Hearts trilogy. I don't think I really have anything to add on to the review of the second book because I kind of spoke for both of the books. Then I read the Heartstopper series. I really like the series. It was very wholesome, very sweet. I wish I could like reread the series again for the first time. It just gives you the best feelings. Then I read From Blood and Ash, the first book in this series, and I really liked it. And I wouldn't say that I loved it. I wouldn't say that it's a highlight read of the year by any means, but I really liked it. Then the next book that I read is A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which is the second book to that one. Then I read two books by Lynn Painter. I read her new release from this year, Made for Each Other, and I really liked this book. It's like a billionaire romance. I really liked the setup. I thought it was super fun, and I just had a great time reading it. I don't think my expectations are necessarily the highest for Lynn Painter books, but in terms of like a fun romance, definitely did the job. And then I read Accidentally Amy, and I really did not like this book at all. I think for a fun romance it did not do the job. I didn't really believe in their love story, and I also didn't like either of the characters. Then I read My Good Side, a memoir by Sheena Shea. I watched Vanderpump Rules at the beginning of this year, and so I thought it'd be fun to read her memoir. I enjoyed it. I think that if you don't know who she is, definitely don't pick up the memoir, but I had a good time and I'm glad I read it. Then I read I Who Have Never Known Men. This was a very different story, but I did enjoy it. And then I read The Compound, which again I really enjoyed. I really liked the premise, and I don't think that it was executed as well as it could have been by any means, but the premise in and of itself was kind of enough for me actually. Then I read Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I really liked it. I don't think it's like my favorite Ali Hazelwood book. Then I read Mr. Wrong Number by Lynn Painter. I did enjoy this one a lot. Again, I feel like not the best romance book out there. Would never reread it, still really enjoyed it. Then I read Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is the second book in this duology after Ninth House, and honestly both of these books in this duology genuinely just feel like a fever dream. I think it's good, but it's very like, what the heck did I just read? But if you're into that, then this would be really good. Then I read Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. I liked this book a lot. I do live in Toronto, and this book, a lot of it does take place in Toronto, and so there's lots of like places that they talk about and stuff that was really fun to be like, oh my gosh, I know exactly where they are right now. So that part was really fun, and I also really like the characters in this book. Then I read Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood, which is like a novella, and I liked it a lot. It didn't like knock my socks off or anything, but I'm glad I read it. It was a really good time. And I read Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood as well, and I really liked this book. I had a really good time reading it, and I really liked the characters in this one, especially our female character. I really liked her. Then I read The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This is like a book that I picked up at a thrift store. I definitely could have done without this book. Like, it was fine, but I just don't feel like we actually got anything done in this book, and I don't feel like anything was resolved in this book, and I don't know. I just don't understand what the point of this book was, to be honest. Okay, then I read Terms and Conditions, which is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and I honestly don't have a huge recollection of what happens in this book. I kind of forgot that I read this one, to be honest. Then I read The Innocents. This was another thrift store find. I liked the setting of this book, and that's kind of why I picked it up. I thought it would be a nice story of people who live in the nature and wild, rugged lands of Newfoundland, but it was really, really weird, and I wish I hadn't read it. Then I read Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is probably my favorite book of the year, my favorite book that I've read in a long time. Really hard to put down, and I love this book so much. Then I read Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I loved this book. This is one of my favorite reads of the year as well. This has stuck with me, and I think about it a lot. Then I read Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. You're not super interested in it, I would probably just say skip it, to be honest. It was fine. It felt very predictable to me. It was okay, I don't know. And then I read The Maiden, and this book was good. It was definitely dark and twisty, definitely very addictive for sure. Then I read House of Salt and Sorrow and House of Roots and Ruin. These definitely felt like a fever dream. These were very good sort of gothic dark romanticises. I would definitely recommend this series if you are interested in it in any way, shape, or form. Okay, then I read City of Ashes, which is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. This one was definitely much better than the first one. Then I read Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, the first two books in The Lord of the Rings, and I've watched the movies countless times. I'm glad to have finally read the books. I feel like they did a great job adapting with the movies, but there's definitely quite a bit more in the books. Then I read the third book in the Mortal Instruments series, City of Glass. It was definitely action-packed, but it was like I think a little longer than it needed to be. Then I read The Return of the King, the third book in the Lord of the Rings. Then I read Wild Card by Elsie Silver, the last book in the Rose Hill series. I really like the story, and this one will be my second favorite book in the Rose Hill series. And then I read These Violet Delights and Her Violent Ends. I unfortunately didn't really like this series, so I'm not going to be continuing on with any of the books in this universe. Then I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. Unfortunately, I didn't really connect to the main story. Like, the side story that we have is like fun and good, but I didn't really connect to the main story, so I just didn't really enjoy this book. Then I read One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune, another one of my absolute favorite books of the year. And then I read This Summer Will Be Different, definitely my least favorite Carly Fortune book. For the sake of completing her backlist, I guess I'm glad that I read it, but I wouldn't really go back in time and read it again. And then I read This Woven Kingdom by Tahira Mafi, and I'm so glad I did. Oh my gosh, this is Tahira Mafi's fantasy series, and I absolutely loved this book. It was so good, and I'm so excited to continue on the series. And then I read The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. I really liked this book. And then I continued on with Part of Your World, which is the second trilogy. Really enjoyed this one as well. I think this might be one of my favorite male main characters. Definitely a highlight read of the year as well. Then I read Anatomy by Dana Schwartz. This is like gothic, mystery, romance. It was really good. I loved our female main character. She is so badass. Then I read These Infinite Threads, which is the second book with This Woven Kingdom, and I really loved this book. And after finishing it, unfortunately, I was scrolling on TikTok and someone didn't disclaim a bit of a spoiler. I haven't continued since. Kind of took the wind out of my sails for this series, unfortunately. Then I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I feel like everyone's read this, everyone loves this, and I'm part of everyone now. Then I read City of Fallen Angels, the fourth book in the Mortal Instruments series, and I definitely liked this one. I feel like this one, we kind of got to explore side characters even more, and I really liked that. Then I read Powerful, and I really liked this. The Powerless trilogy isn't really my favorite, but this novella was definitely worth the time reading. It was a very sweet love story, and I thought it would just be super sad, but it wasn't. Then I read the Divergent trilogy. It was okay. It personally just wasn't my favorite. And then I read another Ali Hazelwood book, Love on the Brain. I really liked this one. I thought that their relationship was just so good. I think this is probably one of my favorite Ali Hazelwood books. Then I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I love the premise of this, and I loved our characters. Side story that both of our characters have to go through in this is quite heavy, but I feel like that also made it really good. And then I read It's a Love Story by Annabelle Monaghan, and I've loved her other three books that I've read from her. Unfortunately, I just didn't like this one. I felt like it was very cringe to read. I also just didn't really love the writing in this. It felt like it could have done with another review. I don't think that's a very popular opinion, but that is just how I feel. Then I read Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I enjoyed my read of it. I did feel like it was quite heavy, which is, I guess, Abby Jimenez's style a little bit, to have the romance with very heavy side plots. Yeah, I did not really enjoy the side plot that much. It was definitely very difficult to read about. Then I read the new release from Ali Hazelwood, Problematic Summer Romance. This one was good, but not my favorite. Then I read Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. I've definitely had sort of somewhat high expectations for this series because I've heard such good reviews. I unfortunately did not love it. I think it was good, I just didn't connect with it. Then I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I loved this story, and just genuinely such a wonderful premise. Then I finished the Anatomy duology with Immortality. I just don't think this book was necessary. I feel like it is at the end of the day kind of a love story, and the love story was lacking in this, and even when it was present it wasn't really my favorite, but I did like the backstory and sort of the secret society of it all. I thought that was really good. I just feel like it could have been a standalone. Then I read Aragon by Christopher Paolini. This is a book I've wanted to read forever. I liked it. I think it's a really fun story. Perhaps a little simple, perhaps not necessarily the most original, but publishing this as a 16-year-old 12-year-old I think he was when he wrote it, is very impressive, and the story is really fun. And then I read Fearless to finish off the Powerless trilogy. I feel like half of this book was good, the other half I didn't like. I read The Love of My Afterlife, and this is very quirky. I did have a good time reading it, definitely was my favorite. Then I read Forget Me Not. Very similar feelings, that it was good, not the best, not highlight reads, but if you're in the mood for a romance like this, then I would say they're good. Then I read The 7-Year Slip. I did enjoy this book, but I feel like people, like, it's one of their all-time favorites. I feel like that is a very popular opinion, and it is not one of my favorites. It was good, but I wouldn't like reread it or anything. Then I read In the Weeds by B.K. Borison, and I also read Business Casual and Love Light Farms. I actually read Mixed Signals last year. I just don't think that this series is for me. I think that the stories and the characters are very underdeveloped and just not very vivid. I just don't connect with any of them. These have been recommended as like very atmospheric reads, which I also very much disagree with, and people also like the town, but I feel like you don't know anything about the town other than there's a telephone tree and like 2 small businesses, so I'm so sorry, they're not for me, unfortunately. Then I read the next 3 books in the Windy City series. So I read Caught Up, Play Along, and Rewind It Back, and I loved all of these books so much. Definitely a top romance series. Then I read If We Were Villains by Emma Rio. I liked this book. I didn't love it. It's very much whodunit, and I just didn't really care whodunit, but I did like the story, all the characters that we get in here. I thought they were very interesting. Then I read Brimstone, the 2nd book in the Fane Alchemy series, which comes after Quicksilver, and I liked this book. I liked that we got a lot more of one of my favorite side characters, but I just didn't feel like a lot happened in this book. Then I read Happily Never After, which was fine, and it's short, but I think that definitely came at a cost that we didn't connect with either of the characters. I don't know, I feel like if you just hear the summary on the back, you've read the whole book. Like, you really don't get anything else out of it. Then I read The Deep History of Ourselves, the 4 billion year story of how we got conscious brains. This book is interesting for sure, and if you have never taken any sort of university level biology and psychology classes of any kind, this would be super interesting. But as someone who has taken several of those classes, I just didn't get anything new out of this. And then I read A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. I loved this book. I thought it was really interesting. It's all about communicating with dragons, and she has to do that to save her family, and it was very high stakes. And then I finally read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. I loved it so much. Definitely a highlight read for me. I read Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. I genuinely just don't really have anything to say about this book. I would not recommend it. And then I read City of Lost Souls, 5th book in the Mortal Instruments series. So I almost got to finish this series before the end of the year, but not quite. I'm 1 book short, and this book was genuinely just really fun. That is it for my reading year. I also read like 50% of Kingdom of Ash, which is pretty substantial. I wanted to finish that one before the end of the year, but I didn't get there. Those are all the books that I read in 2025. I'm pretty proud of the amount of books that I read this year, but I think that my goal of reading as many books as possible over the last few years, I think I have completed that by reading 150 books in a year. That feels kind of unreal in a way, and so going to next year, I'm looking forward to reading just a few fewer, sort of not just finishing books for the sake of finishing books. But with that being said, I would say that for the most part, I really did love and enjoy all of these books. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope maybe you were able to find a recommendation or two. Maybe you agreed, disagreed with anything. As always, let me know in the comments, and I will see you hopefully in the next video very, very soon. Bye!